Because there's two conflicting ideas going in my head.
Here we go.
Okay. Oh, don't pick your nose. I just did.
Yeah,
Too
because
late. Too late. It's going to show. It's going to show. It's going to show.
hello,
There's a flaw in the delay.
everyone. There is a flaw in the delay, and there's a flaw when I delete the waiting or coming soon or what does it normally say? I can't even remember the little
Starting soon.
Starting soon.
Starting soon.
We are terrible live streamers. We don't have a starting soon
Not great.
button right now or banner. We messed it all up. Hello, everyone.
Yes, greetings. Welcome to the Wicked Opportunities live podcast. And of course, if you listen to the podcast, you usually just hear our voices. But if you're new to this, we once a month we live the podcast. We live the podcast.
We live stream is what the kids call it. It's what the kids call it. Yeah. So let us know who's here because clearly we don't know unless you drop something in the chat. So drop it like it's hot in the chat. First live stream of 2023.
That's right.
We do have a very strict schedule for the year 2023 in terms of live streams and such. Do. So this is going to be the first of many, and we'll pretty much be monthly, and we'll have a cadence that we'll talk about. Maybe we'll tease it at the end.
We could tease it at the end, but there is a lot in store starting March 1st. We have a very hard deadline coming up.
Yeah,
so.
That we did to ourselves. Let's be clear.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, that's the way things usually are. So.
Yeah, I mean, normally people sort of ease into the year. They're like, oh,
we did not.
Let me think of New Year's resolutions and do you have any New Year's resolutions?
Not, I was thinking about this the other day because I was out for a brisk walk, and I had been brisk walking every day since the beginning of the year.
You have been.
But it was not a resolution. It was just I don't know, maybe it was in the back of my mind as a resolution.
I wonder.
But I've never had a hard set resolution oh my gosh, this year I'm going to stop doing this or do this.
I wonder if futurists in general sort of are anti-resolution.
Could be. Futurists are no different from anybody else in the world.
It's true, but I think sometimes we think about obviously time and the future a little bit different, and why only have sort of objective setting in January. Why do we have to resolve to do things or not do things?
That's right.
But no, I mean, the brisk walks have been doing you good.
Yeah, it gave me a little bit more energy, and I need it because March 1st is quickly approaching, and there's client work and internal work and reframing and building of something pretty cool that we can tease at the end of the live stream. We have a whole live stream coming up on this eventually. So.
No, we do. It's already scheduled. It's February 23rd, actually. 2/23/23.
Yes.
23 sort of significant these days.
Yeah.
It's significant for a number of reasons. And February 23rd, you will learn.
There. It's a bit of a insider's private knowledge of what's about to happen. So
there's just a lot. Yeah. So it's funny because we work obviously with partners that help us with website development and all different things. And a partner that we've had for a couple decades now, laughs because they say that we're unlike any other client that they have, in that we purposely try to break ourselves and reinvent ourselves every so often.
Every week, basically.
They're normally, our clients just don't want to change. They prefer to stay the same or even go backwards.
If you work at TFS, as our friend Angela Kring in the chat does,
our moderator,
you are aware of the fact that Tuesday and Wednesday may not be the same company.
Yeah. So we have new folks. We have folks joining us for the first time.
I see that.
Katrina, we have Madrid. Oh my gosh.
I miss him.
So I
think I did this last time.
I turn 50 this year.
Oh yeah.
The big 50. It's part of the reason why I've been a little bit nostalgic,
it's nothing
emotional.
To be, I passed that a long time ago, and I'm going to tell you that it's the best part of life.
Yeah.
It's the best part of life.
So I turned 50 in May. So it's kind of interesting. May 5th, 5/5, and I turned 50. That's
great.
I feel like
this is your year.
I need to go somewhere.
This is your
I don't
year.
know, but it's my year. That's always dangerous. I think people stop doing that around 2020, saying it's their year.
For some crazy reason, who knows why.
So I want to know from you all in the chat, where should I go?
So if you live in Madrid, maybe you're like, why do you want to go to Madrid?
Because I love it.
Because Madrid's amazing.
And then,
hello from Copenhagen. I want to go back to Copenhagen.
Maybe we should go to Bentonville, Arkansas.
Hey, what's wrong with that?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Welcome, Bentonville.
And Copenhagen. Oh, gosh. These are all great places. I want to go to all of those places.
And our friend Katrina joined us for the first time. Welcome.
Yeah, so let's not talk about February anymore because we are futurists and we like to talk about the future, but today we have a very exciting live stream topic planned, and of course, we have to plan these ahead of time because we have to schedule them. We want to advertise them, and so this was brainstormed before the holidays. It was last year, essentially, for all intents and purposes.
A whole year ago.
Quite literally. Not 12 months ago, but definitely last year. And so, I know what the general topic is, but it's not...
Oh, yeah. It's not as fresh in your mind as it was back then.
So I look over to Frank literally seconds before I hit the go live button. You can see we don't have our shit together today. And he's scrolling on his phone and he's looking at the description.
Okay, to be fair, let me just explain. So now that you've ratted me out, I was like, I
had the same idea, but I didn't have a chance to do it.
I said, what did the description actually say? Because I don't want to get too far away from it because I've got 3 different ways to approach this topic in my mind today. So I wanted to try to stay on track somewhat, which is almost impossible for Frank to do. But I'll see what I can do about it.
Sometimes, I
forgot what the description said from months ago.
No, it's fine. It's sometimes, it's really kind of very much the dynamic of our partnership in that you are much more organic and emergent, and I am much more of an A-type, planner. What's the answer?
You've changed a lot over time.
You have rubbed off on me, and I have rubbed off on you just a little bit too.
No, a lot.
So when we do our regular podcasts that are pre-recorded, and a whole new slate and collection is starting this year, we're really excited about. But we don't script anything, but we do sort of outline it. We want to know what the story arc is, what examples we're going to use. If we're going to reference somebody, we want to make sure we have the right reference and all of that stuff. Of course. And so for the live streams, typically we'll huddle up like a few minutes before and we'll be like, okay, this is what we had meant for this to be. And then today, I think because the topic is so spicy and like we could talk about this topic for 6 hours straight.
Yes.
And not cover the same thing. That I almost wanted it to be more like, let's see. It reminds me of, and I've said this before.
See what happens.
But the old talk show with Regis and Kelly.
Philbin? What's his name?
Philbin. Rest in peace. Passed away a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They would they had the witty banner at the beginning of their show, but they would purposely avoid each other when they were like in hair and makeup because I didn't see you in hair and makeup today.
No makeup for me and hair is unnecessary.
I'm sporting the Wicked Opportunities live stream smoky eye.
Yes.
For all of you.
Yes.
All
You're
of you.
the one that matters the most here.
All
anyway,
of you.
So, yeah.
The live stream is the one place where I feel like I can go a little bit.
Let it shine.
A little bit. Shine. I use all my Instagram.
That's right.
Beauty knowledge.
Yeah.
And I try to. Anyway, so they would purposely avoid each other so that their initial banter was fresh and they were really hearing the stories from each other, like for the first time.
Or if you hear the story from Kelly's perspective, Kelly Ripa, she might say they avoided each other for different reasons before they went on stage.
They were sort of not like each other. Anyway, okay, so today's live stream is called "Can We Count on the Future?" And I did not reread the description, but let me see if I can sort of remember and see if it jives.
This will be fun.
So I feel a special kinship with this topic because for those of you that don't know, my background is in finance. Yes.
Or finance, as some might say.
But when you're super suave like me, you say corporate finance, not finance.
It's very Southern.
Finance.
My friend in Bentonville would understand. I'm a Georgian, so I'm from Georgia.
That's true. Well, we are sitting in Florida right now.
Yes.
So, anywho. So my background is much more in the analytics space. I always felt like I was out of place in that field, as you know. But I know my way around an Excel spreadsheet. But even so, I was always, when I was helping my partners, like at Disney, run their business, it was, for me, equal parts quantification and as well as sort of storytelling and narrative and just trying to help them understand and demystify what we were doing.
Right.
So when we talk about building the business case for foresight or showing proof about the results of foresight or like quantifying foresight, all of those things I think people sort of bucket together. I understand where people are coming from. I do.
Of course.
And I think this topic really, I don't know, it sort of lands in that space where foresight is in a unique position in that it is truly a different language and it's a new way of working.
Yes.
But we have to implement it in existing systems and with many times existing mindsets. So right. I think the birth of this topic really came from a lot of places. This is not a new topic, but I think most recently there's been discussion in some listservs and some of the places where futurists gather to spill the tea and to share, not company secrets, but like trade secrets,
Yep.
And they ask for advice from each other. And there's been an ongoing conversation about like, how do we quantify this field?
Yes.
And how do we, show to our leadership and stakeholders and decision makers that it is worth it and it works. Now,
that's right.
Is that sort of what you think the spirit of today's discussion should be?
I do think that's what the
spirit. What would you add to it?
What I would begin to add would be, and I look forward to people who are with us today to, ask questions in the chat or just make comments about
what do you all think about this topic of quantifying the future?
Yeah. Because you're right. I think that's where we sort of said, like, look, this is a long-standing topic, but it's been going on in this listserv recently, so this makes for a great live, because it's something that's near and dear to our heart anyway. And that's the idea that over the decades, foresight has evolved. As a matter of fact, there's been several great papers in foresight journals about the evolution of foresight and sort of the stages of foresight. And early on, when it was, foresight goes back further than this, because of course you can go to Juvenal and, maybe even some of the sci-fi writers, like H.G. Wells or Jules Verne wrote about foresight. And say that they were how they were framing foresight. But in the early days of Western foresight with the Rand Corporation and the military and all of this, it really was more about what's next. And as the field evolves, it's become more about what if, not what's next.
Interesting. So what if instead of what's next?
Yes, and the reason for that is because people started to realize that, as we start to study futures and time studies and, studies about complexity and, social change theories, all these things that go into foresight that weren't there initially when foresight launched, it started to, as any field does, as research was done, as study was done, as practice was done, people started to realize you can't just think about the future in terms of linear mechanical quantification, because it doesn't work that way. So as somebody had said in this listserv, it all depends on the time horizon, right? Because if we're talking about 3 weeks from now, we could probably say this is what's going to happen 3 weeks from now and be fairly accurate, although that's not always true either.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about 3 years from now, especially at the pace things are going now, prediction becomes a fool's errand, a fool's game.
Yeah.
And is that really the utility of foresight anyway? Because it's about challenging our dominant mental models of the world that reinforce what we want to do so that we leverage the future. We would love to leverage the future. We would love for it to be about prediction and certainty, because then we can leverage it to reinforce our official future, what we want to do, what we want to see happen. So counting and mechanical and linear and making sure it's predictive would really be nice if it were true. But is that even really the utility of foresight? Yeah. Because we need to really live in a world that's less certain, that we're comfortable with uncertainty, not trying to reinforce certainty, because really what that does is it helps us to reinforce things that we're already doing. I wrote earlier on somebody's post on LinkedIn. Somebody was saying, we're starting a new project on prediction and foresight, because we often say foresight's not about prediction, the future's not about predicting. But this person was saying, but maybe it is. Maybe it is. As a matter of fact, we saw a really famous speech at a big futures meeting just last year. The launching keynote was about we need more data and more prediction and foresight. And there's been a lot of heated, arguments about that topic. And this person was saying, maybe we can predict more. But a great example of that is like the idea of carbon capture. So it's a technology, right? And it's a trend, and it's this new idea, capturing carbon. It's been around for a while, right? But there's new technologies about how we can capture carbon. But now you're seeing more and more people wake up to the idea that that's a way to sort of like capture the future or wrangle it for our own purposes, because it sounds good, but is it something we made up just so that we can keep doing the same thing? Because if we can capture all the carbon we want, why not keep using oil all the time?
Yeah.
And so it's a way to try to predict our way into doing what we want to continue to do to reinforce the dominant narrative. And that's why prediction is so dangerous.
So I think quantification, when people say, I want to quantify the future, I mean, you can look at it in several different ways. You've talked about a couple of them already, maybe more. There's certainly the component of, I want to quantify the future because I want to be able to predict it. And I want to be able to, leverage those predictions for gain and to continue what I'm doing. And so there's definitely that element. We can discuss that further. There's also, I think, obviously a related element, but I see it as slightly different. Maybe it's my finance brain. But there's this desire to quantify the future that really was something that I was doing in finance years ago. And that was, thinking about what is the return on investment? What is the net present value? What is the internal rate of return? What is the ROI on these projects that have future cash flows? And so in some ways, that's what people are asking. What is my return on investment in investing in foresight? And I get it. Yeah. Those two topics are related, right? Because part of what people think the return is that I'll be able to predict the future. I'll face less uncertainty. I'll have less risk, less failure, more success.
And I would add, yes, and that the return on investment is about the way that we make decisions in our present decision matrix. So that's how they really relate to each other, what we're saying.
Absolutely.
Because I believe my return on investment has to do with my dominant narrative. This is the way the world is, and I want to make sure that no matter what trend comes at me, that I'm able to navigate it, manipulate it, leverage it to continue to do what we're doing now, because that's where my ROI is going to be.
When someone asks to quantify the future, or believes that they can quantify the future, or wants to quantify the future, inherent in that statement or that question is a desire to do more of what they're doing.
That's right.
So
to do more of the same.
Because if you're looking to quantify something, by definition, you feel like you already know the variables. And so the variables are A, B, C, or X, Y, Z, or whatever your equation is. And when you're looking to quantify the future, you're saying how much more of X, Y, and Z, or less of X, Y, and Z am I going to have, or do I need to do, or X, whatever it is that you're asking.
That's it.
And so the problem with that is the future doesn't give what about your variables. And what we know for sure is that there will be new variables, or variables that exist today will be reframed. And so when someone is asking about quantifying, it's less about, telling them, well, we can't quantify the future, we can't predict the future. Okay? It's more about really getting into their perspective and their mental models and finding out, like, why are they asking that question?
That's right.
And we have work to do. And instead of making the conversation about we shouldn't quantify the future, or there shouldn't be numbers, or there shouldn't be data, you're never going to win that argument with someone, right?
Right.
It's as foresight professionals, I think it's what you're saying. It's like, it's really going back to the mental models.
Yes.
And saying you're thinking about this thing all wrong. Right? You're looking to add to your toolkit, another wrench. And you have a bunch of wrenches, you just feel like you need one more different size of wrench to be able to do this thing that you're doing. So if you're asking about quantification, chances are you just don't get it. You're not that into foresight, or you don't really think of it the way it's really should be thought of.
Yes, I would like to frame exactly what you're saying a slightly different way. That's a really powerful thought. I would like for foresight to look like the other wrenches in my toolkit.
Oh, no, for sure.
I want it to look, so it's a co-opting of the field.
Co-opting, let's just stop there for a second. Because I do think it's important. Yeah. And again, friends, trust us, because we aren't just, people that help develop other futurists and unlock this ability. We practice foresight. We do client work. We are practicing futurists. I don't think you can be a developer if you're not also a practicing futurist. So we understand the line that we're walking. It feels like it's a tightrope.
Every day.
8 million feet up in the air, where you're trying to work with what you got and meet people where they are.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, you need to do that.
Absolutely. But what we've also learned over several decades is that you have to be really, really careful with towing that line.
That's why it's so tricky. It's like, how do you meet people where they are when where they are
is wrong? Not wrong.
You went hard right there. Well, when where they are is in a dominant narrative that our futures either will change or need to change. For instance, I saw, and I hope I'm not, I want to come back to this co-opting thing, so let me not forget.
I'm writing it down on my note paper.
But I just want to take a little bit of a turn here, because I saw this great post yesterday from this individual that I'm not going to remember the name of because I'm not super familiar with her at the moment, so that's my fault. But I'm becoming more familiar with her work. She's out of Amsterdam, I believe. And she's running a company now called something like Create for NI. And so she was saying we need more NI and less AI. So what is NI? NI is something that she coined or that has been coined before, but she's really, I think it would be fair to say, if you look at her site, that she's done a lot to really help coin this word and popularize it. Natural intelligence. So we know what AI is. It's artificial intelligence, right? And Yvette, I'm staring over here because Yvette's sort of looking it up.
I could have sworn that you...
Yeah, it was the one right after that post, but I did it after this post, so I don't know. You'd have to go to my profile.
Let me view the view profile. Keep going.
And there it is.
Okay.
And so I'm going to give you her name here in a minute. That's why I'm hesitating. Her name is Lene Goranson. And the site is, I believe, Create. If you go down just a little bit.
I was going to just put
Center, Centre, CENTRE, as you know, it would be spelled everywhere except America. A Center for NI, Natural Intelligence. So why did I get off on this tangent here? Because it's a way of framing the future that is not the dominant narrative. Because I'm having this great conversation right now with my friend Michael Compton, an amazing individual who works at Denison University in Ohio, an inventor, creator, artist, professor. And he's really into AI, but he also understands exactly what we're talking about. So he's really into AI and is also very into this whole idea of seeing the future differently. And so he was saying even to me, even this morning, AI scares us because it shows us the idolatry we have about knowledge. This is so heavy. But it shows us that we have an idolatry about gaining more knowledge. And so we frame everything, this whole conversation about AI, because, by the way, AI is nowhere near being artificial intelligence like we would understand intelligence, like consciousness. But AI doesn't have consciousness. It's just about what you feed into it, right?
Yep.
And so it scares us because we're like, is it going to lord over us and reinforce a pathway? Because if it knows the dominant narrative, it's going to reinforce that, and it's going to kill, all other futures except one.
Yeah.
And the way we're framing it is like, no, AI is going to like open up this pathway to all these amazing. How will it do that if the only knowledge it's basing itself on is the pre-existing knowledge that we have? No matter how much knowledge it is, we somehow have this idea that's going to take all that knowledge and come up with new worlds. That's what humans can do. That's called consciousness, not knowledge. And so the reason I got off on that is because NI is a very different future from AI. But we can certainly use AI and say, oh, AI is great and it quantifies everything. And we can use that to quantify what we're doing. And even though it's very crazy from the future we had when we started our company in 1950, we're going to adapt to it to keep doing what we do already. It's a quantification. It's a return on investment of the decision matrix that we already have.
Yeah, and I think, foresight...
NI is a very different future.
I think foresight professionals, just to bring it back, I think from a tactical perspective, walking that fine line, that tightrope. I've seen a few different scenarios for how foresight professionals and futurists respond to the fact that we have this situation where the field can be co-opted, and the field is growing, and we always are excited to see new faces at the live stream and in our programs, and that's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. And so part of the field, seeks to be the police and be like, no, that's just not how it works, which I understand. There's importance to having rigor. It's one of the reasons why we have a certification program.
That's right.
And so I see that as one response. Another response is, well, we're just not going to service that industry, that sector. We're not going to do corporate foresight because that's an oxymoron. You can't have foresight in a corporate environment, right?
Right.
So we've heard that a lot, and I trust me, I got my start as a corporate futurist. So I understand it is extremely challenging to practice foresight in a corporate or governmental or not. I mean, it's challenging really everywhere. We just don't see that the end game in ignoring all, huge sectors of our economy, of our reality, that's going to turn out well for us.
It's not going to turn out well because it's the people that are in there.
That's the thing.
I'm not worried about the company as much. Now, if you're listening to me and you were thinking, gosh, we might think about hiring the Future School to help us. Believe me, we have helped companies around the world do some pretty amazing things. But I think it's because, and increasingly so, and if you're in a company today, you know that it's the people that matter. No matter what the system says, it's the people that matter. And so we've got to touch those people's lives. Right?
Ultimately, I think it goes back to what I've said for a long time, is that foresight is a change management tool. I know that doesn't sound as sexy as the trends and AI and chat, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. I get it. But at the end of the day, if you're not investing in capacity building, socialization, and change management in your foresight practices, then you're just looking for another wrench. And you know what? Here's the deal. There are easier wrenches to buy. So don't waste your time. Honestly, the idea of trying to quantify the future, there's decision intelligence. There's predictive analytics. Go do that.
Yeah, right.
And knock yourself out.
Right.
But don't say you're doing foresight because you ain't.
So you went back to the co-opting of the field piece, and it really worries me because I see a lot of people coming to the field and they hear the word futures and foresight and all, the field's wide open. Arms should be wide open for everyone. And there are a lot of different things to talk about in the field. There's not one way of just seeing foresight. It's a pretty big discipline. Yeah. It's a funnel discipline. It's a big discipline. And that's a good thing.
And P.S., it uses data. We use data.
Absolutely.
I also want to be really clear that we're not suggesting that our scenarios don't include both quant and qualitative data.
Of course.
This whole idea of calling for the quantification of the field is something completely different.
Is a different thing. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to, before I forgot, and I see some great questions from Sue Ellen on here, which are fantastic questions. Love. That Because of this listserv discussion that's been going on about quantifying the field.
It's not a new discussion, but yes.
Yeah, that's not a new discussion at all. But it's come back up again because there's some loud voices, good voices, loud voices in the field that are calling for a greater quantification of the field, which is actually going back to Rand in 1950.
Everything old is new again.
Well, everything's old is new again.
Make foresight great again.
But the reason, and I'll say what I was going to say,
kidding.
but the yikes. But the reason that they're calling for that is because, again, we want the forces that have control now to accept foresight. That's what you already said. I want to reinforce
but I
that.
like that, because I think it is true. It's not like, I don't think any of these people are like, oh gosh, I'm going to co-opt the field because I am an evil scientist.
No.
It's truly because they are genuinely excited about this field, and they're trying to make a square peg fit in a round hole, and
trying to get the leaders to accept it.
So I'm going to speak their language.
And the only way they'll accept it is they're like, well, give me a number, throw me the ROI.
And again, it's because you haven't done the hard work of mindset shifting, of change management.
That's right.
That's it. Let's just pause here a moment.
Yes.
Because it's like, I can't believe we've been partnering together for as long as we partner, and we still get excited when we're talking about this stuff, like genuinely excited, which is sort of...
The burnout hasn't happened yet, folks, so welcome to Foresight. So.
Remember that time that we almost missed our flight? Because we were, it's like in the COVID era, it's really gross to think this. It was gross even in the pre-COVID era.
It was gross then, too.
But we were sitting at the airport on the floor.
I mean, lots of people do it. People sleep at the airport.
They don't give you enough chairs. This is an infrastructure issue here, not us. But we were on the floor, and we were prepping for a client engagement by using our trend cards.
Yeah, so we have maybe 30 cards like spread out.
We were talking about them.
Hey, sir, sorry, move. You're stepping on my foresight cards over here.
We were across the way from our boarding area. Yeah. Nobody cares about this story. I don't know why I'm telling it. But my point is that we got so enthralled with this idea of like reviewing our trend cards that at one point you said, gosh, isn't it about time to board? And I was like, no, you idiot. It's empty. Like, it's totally empty.
As
We're
you can
so
see,
early.
There's nobody at the gate.
We're so early. Oh, well, be careful. Everybody was already on the plane.
Yeah.
So we scrambled. But
we literally missed them, going, no, Zone 4. We didn't care, We're like, Zone 4, what does that mean?
Anyway, I think I lost my train of thought because I was so excited about it. But
we got so, we were saying that we're trying to appease the present master.
Yeah, and again,
because they made me director of foresight at the company.
I got to get results,
and I needed my paycheck. But it's not. But again, I agree with that. It's not. I don't think these people are just like, I just want my paycheck. No. They're genuinely excited about the field.
Yeah.
But they're going to get fired from this cool job if they can't give the results and all that. And again, that you're saying something so important. We didn't do the hard work first of mindset shifting. That's where you are. Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's hard work, and it's not just something you can bolt on to your existing systems. That's not to say that foresight shouldn't be integrated into your existing processes. We know that we're not going to stop doing a 5-year plan overnight. That's not the point. But if you're a foresight practitioner, or if you're working with an organization, you have to include in your processes assumption and bias work, mental model shifting, change management, in addition to teaching them how to do the foresight things. It's one and the same. I think that's the big thing. It's like people see this field as a collection of tools, or they see it as, I'm going to do scenarios, or I'm going to do this or that. But what they fail to see is that it's an operating system. It's all interconnected.
Yes.
And you can't really do effective scenarios if you haven't done the mental model work.
Shifted the operating system, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why a lot of people, going back to your comment a few minutes ago, say like, well, why would I even want to do foresight inside of the corporate world? Because they don't want to shift the mental models. They're trying to shift our mental models. And but again, the reason is because we want to shift people's mental models. So of course we can make an argument for being the court jester inside the castle and changing the system, or just creating a brand new system outside. I think both are legit.
Yeah.
I think both are legit.
I will say that
but we can't leave people behind.
In terms of quantification, and I don't know if we want to at this point address the questions that are in the chat, but
I love it.
In terms of quantification, the aspect of like, does foresight work? Like, can we have proof or provide some kind of data that showcases that foresight is effective? And again, I mean, there has been the longitudinal study that's been done that we refer back to. But even in those cases, we're still sort of leaning back into existing measurements.
Yeah.
And so this is why, again, shifting systems and changing paradigms is not easy. Yeah. If it were easy, it wouldn't be a paradigm shift, right?
I mean, think about being, because you were. Think about being the foresight professional who's in a corporate role, who needs to show the corporate masters numbers. But you're like, gosh, I hate this little nagging thing on the side that says foresight also, and overwhelmingly, shows us things that we don't even have numbers around.
Yes.
That this company's not dealing with right now. They wouldn't know how to quantify it if they saw it.
That's the thing. That's what I was trying to get at. I'm so glad that you said that, because ultimately, how do you quantify a mindset shift? We don't do that very well.
So do you just not show your corporate masters those pieces of what you found? You go like, don't show them the bulk of our foresight work. Just only show them the things that they can quantify.
I mean, and it ends up causing situations that are really interesting because people are changed. If you're on this live stream, chances are you've been personally changed by this field. And so if you are working within an organization and you get foresight training or you get to be a part of the foresight work, you get personally changed. And if the organization doesn't change alongside you, you become disengaged. And we've seen this time and time again. And it's part of, I think, what came out of the longitudinal study is that if we don't persist, then we get people that are disillusioned, and that's worse than if we had never done or attempted this foresight work at all. So I think the question of quantification is, again, multifaceted. One, clear issue is that we're trying to, by saying that we want to quantify it, we want to predict it. And ultimately, that's not even the coolest part of foresight.
It's not even the coolest part.
The coolest part of foresight is I don't need to predict the future because I'm going to create the future that I want. And I think, oh gosh, again, we've gone down this path before, but I swear that I think part of why large organizations, and we've picked on corporations, but it's really any institution, large institution, large organization, nonprofit, for-profit, public sector, doesn't matter. But one of the reasons I think why they are so reticent sometimes to truly embrace strategic foresight is because, I lost my train of thought, but ultimately I think that it would cause them to really rethink what they are and who they are and how they operate. And an organization exists to stay exactly where it's at.
To stay the same. Those companies, their bylaws, their processes are meant to stay the same. I like what we were doing in 1955. Only thing that's changed since our prices have gone up, because the economy's changed. So before we get to Sue Ellen's 2 questions, which are amazing questions, and if anybody else is in here that wants to just comment on what we've been saying or ask questions, please, because this is a great part to do that. We've talked a lot now. I want to say that as a result of this listserv discussion that was going on, I recently had a conversation with Sohail Inyatullah, the future Sohail Inyatullah, which you can see. We've released that, and it's out there on Vimeo, on our Vimeo channel, and I'm sure that Angela right now is looking up the link, and she's going to put it in the chat for you. But I had a conversation with Sohail about how transformational foresight shifts our decision matrix, the matrix of decisions that we think everything else is weighed against. And when you come to face with transformational foresight, all of those decisions, are they helping us make decisions? What decisions? It throws out that decision matrix and introduces a whole new decision matrix. So if somebody asks, is foresight really helping me make decisions that matter? What decisions that matter? Because foresight can throw out your decision matrix and introduce an entire new one. So when you ask that question, you're not asking the right question when you're facing foresight in the first place.
I mean, again, tightrope, 80,000 feet in the air. Because you do have to operate within a certain amount of the systems that are in place. While also pushing against them. And so, again, I think that's where, foresight is truly a facilitation art. You are facilitating. As a foresight practitioner, you don't come in telling them this is the future or this is what's going to happen. That would actually be easier than what foresight is really about, which is facilitating these conversations. And I do want to go back to this idea of traditional indigenous knowledge and colonizing futures because and it's a topic, by the way, this topic and topics evolving from it is going to be a lot of what the Global Foresight Advisory Council topics that we deal with this year. We're going to have a couple of external speakers. We're going to also have conversations with our GFAC members. So that's our accrediting body for our certification.
As a matter of fact, our next GFAC Live is Ingrid LaFleur, and she's going to be talking about reframing foresight through Afrofuturism.
Yes. So again, and as individuals that are born and raised in the U.S., we have we try to break past our worldviews and our perspectives, and we try to unlearn, but it's inherent in who we are.
Right.
And this idea of quantification is very much a colonization, Western perspective, because it is one of the quintessential, I think, Western perspectives, which
Fred Taylor, measure everything,
which
scientific
makes it,
method.
Again, that's a whole nother layer to this conversation about who owns foresight and who gets to decide how foresight emerges.
Who owns the future?
When
we quantify the future, we say this is who owns it. Whoever's quantifying it owns it, right? Yeah.
So one of the GFAC conversations will talk about this very topic.
Yep.
So we can certainly touch on these questions, but we're going to have an entire discourse around that later this year as well.
We are. So Angela just put in the chat the link to register for the February 1st GFAC Live. And the one that comes after that is really cool, too, because it's the GFAC themselves talking about indigenous ways or practices of foresight. And Sue Ellen was saying originally about how do we ensure that there's no repeat of colonizing features. And I think since then we've probably covered some of that.
Yeah.
And this is really about breaking that colonization. I think in large part it's about breaking that colonization of foresight.
I mean, whether it's foresight or whatever you're practicing, I think, it always goes back to ensuring that you have voices represented in these conversations, and that, it is that simple and that difficult, to be honest, because I think what we've seen, I read somewhere that the vast majority of, for example, the chief diversity officers in organizations worldwide, that position has existed now for a bit. Everybody was really excited when we started to see those. The vast majority are white and male. So it's a bit disconcerting, to the point where it's like, look, I don't want that to be the only position in the C-suite that has representation from, minority groups or indigenous groups. But I mean, if we can't get the chief diversity officer to be diverse, I'm really unsure how you move forward. But, I think foresight and, diversity, inclusion, belonging, all of those realms are so interrelated. We've talked about this for the longest time.
Yes.
Because while no two people have the same past or even the same present, we can co-create a more equitable future. That scared me. The computer just went, whoop.
But it's still there.
So I think that there's an interesting opportunity for further exploration of that intersection.
That's right.
Of change management professionals and professionals in the diversity, equity, and inclusion realm to embrace foresight practices and methodologies and foresight as their operating system. Because if you have a culture of future thinkers, this is how you solve so many of these problems, or at least get in the right direction.
Yeah, I was going to say briefly before I forget that link that Angela put of the recent conversation that Sohail and I had around transformative futures rather than dominant futures. You'll get to hear some of what we did, but the powerful voice on there, more so because I wanted to frame it as a conversation with Sohail. He is Sohail himself talking about how the most powerful outcomes that he's had weren't when they did trend exploration and all that stuff, which he did with people, but it was asking them what their personal feeling about who they were in the future was, how they saw themselves in the future, their persona of the future. And of course, Sohail Idiatella is the creator of causal layered analysis and works with people all over the world to really dive down into their myths and metaphors about the future, which is so powerful and you can't quantify. And it's when he's had the most powerful results, because he's like, people would be like, I don't like what's happening here. And finally he would find out that they felt like they were the wicked stepsister, or they were playing the role of blah, blah, blah. And that's when the change actually came.
I feel like, in part what we need to do as foresight professionals and just people at large that see a change is needed is let's take back the word quantification. Let's reframe the word quantification, because I feel like if you give me the opportunity to reveal my narrative that's quantifiably an impact and successful. And I feel like we are continuing to allow, society and these institutions to push this narrative that something can only be quantified as successful if it can be put into a spreadsheet and added up. Yeah. And I think that we've learned enough as human beings that story and narrative are so critical to change. And it really, pivots very nicely to what our topic's going to be in February and for a good part of this year.
I'm so excited about that.
Our inner development goals. But ultimately, let's stop fighting the game on their turf. And instead, let's reframe the conversation. I think to sort of recap what we've said in today's discussion, which I thought was really, really fun, the idea of quantifying the future, it is very much a Western colonized concept.
Totally.
It reinforces the dominant narrative. It suggests that stakeholders are just looking for a way to maintain the status quo and don't really understand what foresight is.
Yeah.
And I think this idea that if we can't quantify it, it's a less than, is something we really need to just go to therapy about or something. Like we really need to get to that root cause.
We need that change.
Because I feel like even foresight professionals and those in the qualitative sciences, I don't want to speak with too broad a stroke, but it's like we are always apologizing. Well, there's no numbers, but let me tell you what there is. Yeah. But no, I mean,
there's no need to apologize.
There's no need to apologize for it because ultimately the future's not written. And so if you're looking to quantify the future, that's not the future I want to be a part of. Yeah. I want to be a part of the future that we're creating together.
Yeah.
And
for living systems.
And that's
for living systems.
It's way more powerful. And so
actually, to even go back to Sue Ellen's, how is NI different from indigenous knowledge? I don't think that it is. And so, of course, that frames it in the fact that this already existed.
Yeah.
I like how Leanne is as a biologist, is taking this approach to say, I know AI is so popular, so let me frame this against that. It's like we don't need AI, we need NI, which is indigenous knowledge of living systems. And we could go down a rabbit hole of the stuff that we've been writing recently about the fact that we're not separate from nature. We're a part of the living systems. Living systems are what drive. Biocosmology is what drives things. Vernadsky, along with Pierre de Chardin said, the noosphere was it wasn't technological. It's a higher state of consciousness, blah, 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 blah. There's so much, we could talk about there in terms of focusing on living systems. And if you want to get me on a soapbox, get me on the soapbox of, being so focused about building metaverses and blockchains and all, which are fine if they're used correctly and morally and ethically, but they should be helpmates and they should not dominate us. We shouldn't look at them as messiahs and saviors. And why are we bypassing this incredible natural and organic technologies that have so much to show us that we barely tapped into, and we've just throw that away. We instead we want to build something synthetic, which again can be helpmates, but it should be helpmates to those living systems. As a matter of fact, I even heard somebody say recently that the moniker of human needs to be thrown away because we've so used that word to separate ourselves from the rest of nature. Are we humans? Or are we something else? There's the rest of nature. We're a part of the living system.
Are we dancers? Are we human? Are we? No.
Is it a song?
I thought it was.
It sounds like an 80s reference again.
No.
Anyway, I got off on a little bit of a soapbox, but I hope you enjoyed that because I was looking also at Sue Ellen's seventh generation principle, and of course, and for you and I, this is so important. As a matter of fact, we've often mentioned that when we were in New Zealand doing a lot of work in New Zealand. And that one particular beautiful Maori speaker that came and talked about the future principles. And even the Maori word for future is very similar to the word for grandchild.
Or great-grandchild.
Or great-grandchild, which, it signifies that we're looking out for the generations. And so this is about ancestors forward. And living systems again, and not foresight is about not being fixated on self and what can I do for right now. I'm looking out for people not only around the world that need foresight and that have been marginalized, but for people that aren't even born yet. And I believe that foresight in futures is a technology of empathy, of equity, and of love. And we've argued about that before. And I've had people say to me, "Are you crazy? It's just a tool and all that." When you get off on that, you start making it a religion or whatever. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying that if we truly care about the future, we will care about those who aren't even born yet. We should be making a world for them. So, love that, Sue Ellen.
Perfect segue to why we talk about natural foresight and not necessarily strategic foresight.
That's
because
right.
I think, although the term strategic foresight, obviously we use that as well, is really a holdout of like, I do strategy today. How can I add something to it to make it more future-y? So natural foresight, for us is our framework. It's, based on complex adaptive systems, but more importantly, really speaks to the fact that we all have the innate ability to practice foresight and to be future minded. And it's why we're so excited that for the balance of the year, our live streams and our new collection of podcasts will center around the inner development goals. These are the set of 23 traits that were identified by an organization that was made up of global luminaries and learning and development and adult learning and all different experts coming together and identifying what are the traits that will allow us to be successful with something like the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's a great example of quantification. Let me figure out how much my output of CO2 needs to go down for me to be successful, SDGs, versus the idea of a more organic mental technology of foresight around these 23 traits that include things like an inner compass and empathy. So the idea behind the inner development goals is if we can develop these and nourish these traits, these innate traits that we all have, that we can, be more successful from a sustainability and a long-term perspective. But what we have found is those 23 traits are very much foresight traits.
I was just going to say, the way you're even saying it now, I get more excited about this because we already talked during this entire live stream about setting an operating system or a mindset in place first. We haven't done the hard work of that. So classic Western colonial way of thinking will create the Sustainable Development Goals. End poverty. Get climate.
Listen,
you haven't changed minds yet.
I know, but well-meaning, right? So I get it. Like at the end of the day, if we can end poverty, if we can do these quote unquote quantifiable things, will have been successful. And I'm sure if we just put a goal out there, we'll achieve it.
We'll know when the carbon goes down.
So what happens?
It's a number.
What happens is that the existing systems find ways to greenwash and work around to be able to check off the box to say that they're doing it without actually achieving success. And so we're going back to basics and we're talking about how do we unlock our inner ability, our inner futurist to do these things. And so over the next several months, we'll take on every single of the 23 traits in a podcast episode. Each live stream will kick off the collection or the grouping of, there's 5 groupings of the 23 traits. And so join us in February 23rd of 2023 to kick off the 23andMe live stream podcast series. We'll also be giving you a sneak peek about the exciting things to come for the Future School in March.
Question mark?
We'll see.
The Future School? Question mark?
We'll see how that turns out. But we want to thank you all for joining us in today's live stream. We had, I think, the biggest group we've had so far. So that's really exciting. Great way to kick off the year. As you all know, you can catch us on the pre-recorded Wicked Opportunities podcast. Of course, our Global Foresight Advisory Council meets quarterly and has either external speakers or their conversations with. Check out our website for more information on that. If you're looking to join us for learning and development opportunities, we have our foundations and activations and natural foresight programs. And you can find out all of that on our website or by subscribing to our newsletter that comes out every week. It's called 52. So check out more information on our website about that. And lots of exciting things to come. Again, so excited to be with all of you. Thank you for a great conversation. I was feeling a little blue today.
That was one of my favorites.
I was feeling a little blue today, and I would say that initially I was like, wow, this is not the day that I want to be live on camera. You know, I was feeling a little off, but it was exactly what I needed.
I watched this great TikTok last night of something that you taught me a year ago. But they were framing it in different ways. And I think it was like you said, feel or fix.
Yeah.
And somebody put it as hug or help. Do you want to hug or help? And I know today you just wanted the feel and the hug.
The hug,
Don't fix it. Don't fix it.
There's no way to fix it. So, but this helped. This definitely
But helped. I hope that, you know, those of you who join us and join the TFS family can get the same feeling. It's like we're here for hug or help, whichever one you need.
Yeah,
that's what we do, and we want you to join us and then extend what we've done to others and hug or help. So. Yeah, we love each and every one of you, and we're so excited that you join us today, and we look forward to seeing you as we go into this amazing new transition March 1st. We'll announce all that on February 23rd as we start the IDGs and that Yvette's talking about today.
23andMe, baby.
23andMe. It's going to be exciting, and it's a big part of, you'll see how that even plays into the bigger transition. I can't give it away quite yet, but be there on the 23rd of February, and we'll talk all about it.
I'm ending the stream before you give away too much.
That's it. That's all I'm saying.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day, a great week, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.